All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak Wadash, double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone, who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations to the Akim out here pushing this gospel in truth and sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon 8 houses. This is the brother Quanah Watts from the Arizona Great Millstone Camp. Come back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through His spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. And I came across this article earlier, yesterday. Spirit just hopped on me now, to ultimately, get into it, man. And that war in heaven, right, is coming, man. Yahweh Shai and the angels is coming. Esau, over here getting scared, man. And he, as he looks into, his Hubble telescope and his International Space Station and, all these different satellites that he's got out there, take pictures, of what's in space and whatnot. Esau's been, countlessly seeing, different, images and videos of chariots, man. Chariots, 10, 12, 15 times the size of the earth, quarter of the size or half the size of the sun, right? And there's videos all over the world, right? People taking videos, seeing chariots, man. Esau knows what's coming, man. And this article, ultimately touches on that, man. A man, ultimately, named Loeb, if I said his name right, basically saying, hey, man, this object that we're seeing, it very well could be extraterrestrial, right? As you see right here in End Time Headlines, right? It says scientists now say mysterious interstellar object heading to Earth, not natural. Rule out comet theory, man. And this article is going to go into it. Something called 3-1 Atlas, right? They're dubbing 3-1 Atlas. It's not looking natural, man. Right? The way it's moving, right, is not necessarily its size. The way it's moving is not necessarily natural, man. And we're going to read ultimately what they say about it, man. I'm only going to read about half this article, right, and grab a couple precepts, man. But that war in heaven is coming, right? This says the appearance of a mysterious interstellar object has reignited debate over whether extraterrestrial technology could be hiding in our solar system, and it's already been proven, right? Esau's already come out, and say, right, that so-called UFOs, right, so-called UAPs, right, which are the chariots of Israel, are real. Right, they've already come out and said it, man. They ultimately released, documentation, right, declassified documentation of videos and whatnot. Admitting that the so-called UFOs, right, the so-called UAPs, which biblically are called the chariots of Israel, which are the angels, right, in these chariots, are real. Right, they came out and said it. The government, military members, government officials, and whatnot, right, are ultimately coming out, right, and giving their testimonies, man. It was the elder bishops, Manatazak. It's like, I think it was Muwatazak, as well as Tazadak, Tazadakia, right. They were doing an in-transit lesson, right, touching on that, right, playing that video of that official, right, that said that there was a mile-long cigar-shaped chariot, right, that ultimately touched down on I think it was an airport or a military base or something like Air Force base, and then it was so-called, tall, big, huge so-called black men, right, that came out of the chariots, man, and surrounded the chariot, hundreds of them, man, right, so they know, they know what's coming, It says NASA detected the object dubbed 3-1 Atlas on July 1st, sparking a flurry of scientific analysis to determine its origin, right? It says, while more than 200 researchers have concluded it is likely a comet, Harvard physicist Avi Loeb has raised doubts in a newly released preprint paper pointing to one glaring omission. 3-1 Atlas has no visible trail. you know, has no trail, right? It says, there were claims of a tail, Loeb said, but since 31 Atlas is accelerating and its current size is not much larger than the angular resolution of Earth-based telescopes, it is not easy to avoid fictitious elongation of the image as a result of the object's motion. So it's saying, hey, the way that it's moving, its size, hey, there should be a tail, right? There should be some kind of tail, right? And you know what they're talking about is, you know, when you ever see like a, you know, what they call a shooting star or you know, a meteor shower, right? You always see these objects that come into the really like, you know, meteors that come into the Earth's atmosphere, and as it enters the atmosphere, right, it gets hot, it heats up, and it starts to burn and dissipate, and you see these trails, right, that ultimately pop up behind it. And this is what he's talking about, right? He's saying it doesn't have one, right? Says he also questioned the object's unusual lack of gas emissions and its precise retrograde trajectory, which aligns suspiciously with the inner solar system, right? It says Loeb has developed what he calls the Loeb scale, a ranking system to evaluate the likelihood that an object is artificial, and gave 31 Atlas a 6 out of 10, meaning it's most likely, you know, an alien, as he would call it, right? A so-called UFO, UAP, right? Which we know, again, they are the chariots of Israel. You know, matter of fact, let's grab that. Where are you at? So give me 1 second. All right, see right here. This is 2 Kings 6. I'm sorry, verse 15. It says, and when the servant of the man of the Most High was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Yahweh, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And Yahweh opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. Right? Well, our horses, you know, and chariots on fire? No, man. Right? Let's grab that. Right here, right? Hebrews 1 and 7. Verse 5, for unto which of the angels said he at any time, thou art my son, this day I have begotten thee? Right, it's talking about Yahweh Shai. It says, and again, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. And again, when he bringeth in the first begotten into the world, he saith, and let all the angels of the Most High worship him. And of the angels he saith, who maketh his angels spirits, and his ministers a flame of fire. Right? So it's talking about the angels, right? The angels in those chariots, man. You know? That's what it was talking about, man. You know, the chariots, man. The angels in those chariots. Right? And we know that they're real, and we know that they're coming. Right? Going back to the article, it says, that suggests it is more likely than not to be engineered, though he emphasized that his score may change as more data becomes available. It says, among his most provocative theories, Loeb suggests 31 Atlas could be an alien mothership, right? Which we know, hey, the fuck a mothership. It's a father ship, man. Right? A father ship. Releasing small probes to intercept Earth, man. And we've been seeing a whole bunch of chariots, man. Whether they're coming from that, you know, fathership, or you know, or they're just, you know, coming straight from the spiritual realm. Right? Scriptures say that the eyes of the Lord, right, are upon the sinful kingdom, man. right? They looking, at this place, man, taking them notes, sending them notes right back to, right up that, the chain back to Yahweh Bashim Al Shah, man. We know this to be true, man. And again, Esau seeing all this, man, he's getting scared. He getting scared for real, right? Because we're ultimately telling him, hey, these things that you're seeing, they not meteors, man. That they're unexplainable, right? These are the chariots of Yahweh Bashim Al Shah, man, and they coming to get your ass, man. They coming to get your ass. Right? This is Job 10. It's like, what is it? It's like Job 15, verse 21. It says, a dreadful sound is in his ears. In prosperity, the destroyer shall come upon him. And that destroyer means Yahweh Shai. Right? So when Esau about to, fill his belly, the Lord, hey, man, for to take his ass down. And that, again, it says it's a dreadful sound, right? Him hearing this, man. That's something he don't want to hear. Hey, but that's something that he can't stop, man. No matter, right, his space force, no matter, if these nations ultimately come together and try to fight against Yahweh Shah, which is prophesied, man. It's prophesied that these nations will ultimately try to fight Yahweh Shah, but, hey, they're going to lose, right? This is Revelations chapter 12 and verse 7. It says, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, which is going into, Michael the archangel, and which we read about in Daniel's 12th chapter, right? So Michael shall stand up for thy children, and then it says what his angels, right? The angels, right? The chariots, right? That army, and it says and fought against the dragon, which the dragon will be Esau, Edom. It says, and the dragon fought in his angels, which is going into their military, man. Their air force, right, with these different, jets and whatnot, right? The drones and shit like that, the military. And it says what? And prevailed not, meaning the dragon lost, right? Neither was there a place found anymore in heaven, man. All the military finna be destroyed, man. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. That's right, man. And you could read in, matter of fact, let's go there, right? 2nd Ezra 13th chapter, right? It goes into a more in-depth, vision, right, of that war in heaven, man. Right? This is 2nd Ezra, the 13th chapter. And we'll start at verse 1. It says, and it came to pass after 7 days, I dreamed a dream by night. And lo, meaning truly, right? There arose a wind from the sea that had moved all the waves thereof. Right? And I beheld, and lo, that man waxed strong with the thousands of heaven, which is talking about Yahweh Shai, right? And those angels, man, those, what does it say? It says Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. That those angels is going into what? That heaven, that army, the army of heaven, man. The army of Yahweh Shai, right? It says, and when he turned his countenance to look, all the things trembled that were seen under him. And whensoever the voice went out of his mouth, all they burned that heard his voice, like as the earth faileth when it filleth the fire. And after this I beheld, and lo, there was gathered together a multitude of men out of number, from the four winds of the heaven, to subdue that man that came out of the sea. Which is talking about these nations, right? Because we know in Joel, the 3rd chapter, the 2nd chapter, right, that valley Yahweh Shaphat, right, where these nations are ultimately going to be gathered, right, over there in the Middle East, to ultimately fight. And that's where, that's World War III, right? That's World War III. These nations are going to be fighting against each other, right, with a common enemy, right? Majority of these nations are going to be fighting, America, right? Babylon the Great, as well as, Israel, right? The land of Israel, those small hats, those 1948ers, Their goal is going to be to destroy America, man. And they're going to shoot off those missiles, man, right? And at the same time, right, Yahweh Shai is going to crack the sky, right? And these nations, right, are ultimately going to turn together, right, band together, right? As I think it was Ronald Reagan when he made that speech. If there was a a foreign enemy, right, to enter into our airspace, right? Would it not be, a situation, I'm roughly paraphrasing what he's saying, but would it not be a situation where we would all band together, right, and fight against it? Again, I'm roughly paraphrasing, right, what he had said, but, nonetheless, that's what's going to happen. That's prophecy. These nations are ultimately going to stop fighting each other, and they're going to fight or try to fight Yahweh Shai. That's why it says, and to subdue that man that came out of the sea, right? They're trying to take him down, right? It says, but I beheld, and lo, he had graved himself a great mountain and flew upon it, which is talking about that fathership, right? Which could be, right, 31 Atlas. We don't know, right? But Esau sees something, man, and it's scaring the shit out of him. And we know what's coming, right? If it be a chariot, hey, we know why he's scared, man. He has every right to be scared, but we understand that when Yahweh Shai does come, and he's still going to try to fight, right? It says, but I would have seen the region or place. It says, but I beheld, and lo, he had graved himself a great mountain and flew upon it. But I would have seen the region or the place where out the hill was graven, and I could not, because that's how big it was. Right, in every direction, it was far bigger, far greater than, the size of the earth. Right. It says, and after this I beheld, and lo, all they which were gathered together to subdue him were sore afraid, yet durst fight. They're gonna fight anyways, right? It says, and lo, as he saw the violence of the multitude that came, he neither lifted up his hand nor held sword nor instrument of war. But only I saw that he had sent out of his mouth as it had been a blast of fire, and out of his lips a flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast out sparks and tempests, which is going into those laser beams, man. Which you can watch, right? The movies, what is that? War of the Worlds. Those laser beams coming out of those chariots. I had just seen the new War of the Worlds with Ice Cube, it was spiritual for the first half, man, and then it was actually the whole movie was spiritual, really, but as far as dealing with this topic, right, that the first half of the movie was on point, man, but I would say go watch it, man. It was an alright movie, in my opinion, but nonetheless, man. Watching War of the Worlds, watching Independence Day, right? Movies like that, right? You'll see that, right? The laser beams coming out, which is going to be, it's going to be a far greater sight to see when when it actually takes place, but those ultimately kind of give you a base, right? To understand, right? It says, verse 11, it says, and they were all mixed together, the blast of the fire, the flaming breath, and the great tempest, and fell with violence upon the multitude, which was prepared to fight, and burn them up every one, so that upon a sudden of innumerable multitude nothing was to be perceived, but only dust and smell of smoke. When I saw this, I was afraid, right? Because again, right, that gives you a more in-depth vision, right, of what's about to take place, when Yahweh Shai cracks the sky, man, right? It isn't just gonna be, one and done, he shows up and, nations are taking, no, man, there's gonna a sequence of events that are going to happen, right, in this one major event, but ultimately the goal is what? Yahweh Shai, when he comes, he's destroying these damn devils, man, and their armies, right? Isaiah the 34th chapter, man, right? Destroying their armies, man, and call all Yahweh Shemel Shai, man. Hey, more and more chariot sightings are taking place, which means we're getting closer to the end, man, closer to, Yahweh Shai cracking the sky, man. So with that, Lord wills, that find Lord will straight to the point. I want to give all praise, honor, glory to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem, Kakradash, that belongs to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, great millstone. Until next time I say shalom.